In 1984, it was the golden age of the moustache. But 1984 was also when the British Army launched an attack on Europe. Okay, it was an exercise, but it was Britain's biggest mobilisation since the Second World War, and their biggest exercise ever, and probably always will be. In this episode of Intel, I'm retracing the journey they took to explain why. It was known as Exercise Lionheart and was made up of two interlinked exercises, Full Flow and Spear Point. Exercise Full Flow is the part that I'm doing. It's just after 7 AM and I need to be in Germany tonight. The first part, Full Flow, was a deployment through the rear combat zone, and Spear Point was the field training exercise for 1 BR Corps. This was when Britain had a corps. So what actually is a corps? Well, a field corps is made up of 2 or more divisions, so its size is measured in not thousands, but tens of thousands. In fact, Exercise Lionheart involved a massive 131,565 UK personnel, regular, reserve and territorial army. The MOD actually chartered civilian aircraft and ferries to move over 50,000 personnel into Germany. Back then, the Channel Tunnel didn't exist. It wasn't finished or built for another 10 years. But if the army was to do it all again today, they probably would send troops and tanks through this tunnel, and they have actually practiced doing that in the past.
Again, because of the sheer numbers, although the RAF have flown a large number of people, we've had to go to British Airways and again charter aircraft in order to get the people into Gütersloh, and if you went to Gütersloh, you see a lot of British Airways bringing soldiers in.
290 flights from the UK transported 32,000 personnel. This was then followed up with 150 sailings across the North Sea and English Channel using civilian ferries. These carried 23,600 personnel with 14,000 vehicles and trailers. It was an exercise of planning and logistics where not everything went to plan.
I mean, we've had trains stopping at the wrong station and people getting out, and other trains stopping or not stopping at the station and people not getting out. And of course, inevitably, transport would be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I mean, these are just the hiccups that one learns to live with and deal with on the spot.
But you haven't lost too many of the tens of thousands yet?
Not yet, not yet. It's early days.
By and large, most of the transportation was successful. Crossing the Rhine at the moment, and in 1984, 750 main battle tanks crossed the Rhine using engineers' combat bridges.
It's a stage which every troop commander dreads because he finds out whether he's got his sums right or not.
And I'm waiting for my squadron to go through, the last vehicles to go through, and then I can leave.
So why has he decided to blow the bridge?
Why? Well, ask him. I'm only here to blow the bridge.
13,000 RAF personnel were also involved, deploying Harriers into the field and operating the newly introduced Tornado aircraft, which only retired from active service this year. Providing the opposition, there was a force of more than 10,000, made up of German, Dutch, American and Commonwealth personnel.
We fight with the English army at north, and we want to little bit destroy him there.
And we just caught these guys coming up the hedgerow from RA1 towards one of our other positions. We just happened to be waiting. We saw them. And for them, the war is over. Okay?
Lionheart was the first time US forces had operated in Europe with their new M1 Abrams tank and M2 Bradley combat vehicles.
Because this is your new armoured personnel carrier.
Yes, sir. The Bradley carries 11 soldiers. It is equipped with a 25mm cannon, which can fire armor-piercing and a high-explosive round for any personnel.
It was also a first for Britain, who were operating the new Challenger tank.
I must say, moving on to these is a different ball game. Chieftain was very much slower. This is frighteningly fast, especially in sort of the dodgy conditions that we had last night when it was very slippery on the roads.
It's really impressive. It's a lot better than Chieftain. It's a lot faster, the engine's more reliable, it's got a lot of cross-country capability.
what do you think of the exercise so far?
Well, we haven't done much on the exercise. We've really been in reserve, like.
Yeah, it does seem like the Challenger was held in reserve quite a bit.
We have, and I think you will appreciate, had a number of days when we have not done a great deal. However, we have seen how this new tank can operate extremely well and cover country very fast.
Well, sadly for the Royal Hussars, their Challengers were again held in reserve this morning.
So for me, this journey's been quite easy, to be honest. All I had to do was get a couple of tickets and get in the car. But Exercise Lionheart was on a massive scale. It was the same size as if the entire population of Gloucester packed their bags and decided to invade Europe. Which, even with Brexit, isn't that likely. But as you might imagine, with thousands of people and armoured vehicles, there was plenty of encounters with the local German population.
But suddenly, the war is interrupted by the unexpected arrival of 2 boatloads of locals on a day out, who are amazed to discover a bridge where a bridge didn't used to be. And with the approach of the chieftains, there's only time for a quick hello and goodbye, as the Germans are helped across and sent on their way.
In fact, there was a team set up to focus solely on the clean-up operation. There's even stories of the odd German farmer politely asking German tank drivers to knock down their old outbuildings so they could have new ones built, funded by NATO, of course. And as you can imagine, with anything of this scale, accidents did happen. Luckily, in this accident, no one was hurt. But elsewhere, 3 British soldiers died and 7 were seriously injured.
We have been lucky in having a far less number of serious accidents than one might have expected. I know this is of no consolation to those, the relatives of those who have been killed on the exercise, and they have my deepest sympathy at this time.
I think it might be time to address the elephant in the room. The British Army doesn't have the numbers to do something like Exercise Lionheart today. With around 50,000 personnel deployable at any one time, it looks increasingly like Exercise Lionheart might be the last time the British Army ever trains in such scale. But does it really need to anymore? In 1984, the Iron Curtain was still up, and the world was in the depths of a Cold War. East and West were building up their nuclear arsenal, and the Soviet Union was locked in a war in Afghanistan. So 10 hours of driving later, and if I was doing this drive in 1984, this would be my final destination. I wouldn't be able to drive any further than this point, because this is where Germany was cut in half. This is where the border was. So to the east, just over this fence, this was the inner Germany border. And on the other side was the German Democratic Republic and the Soviet Union. And on this side, it was NATO. And this is where Exercise Lionheart was taking place. The observation post was actually put there by the Americans, the US. And it's because NATO thought that an attack from the Soviet Union would come through this gap. But some would say that today the threat from Russia is renewed. In that case, it's reassuring to know that the skills and lessons learnt from Exercise Lionheart haven't been lost. An engineering and logistical effort of this scale and size can be replicated by NATO forces. A NATO Allied Rapid Reaction Corps, funnily enough based just outside Gloucester, have carried these skills into the modern day.
I'm a logistics guy, and the logistics of Lionheart and what we do today are still, very similar challenges. The requirements are still very similar. It needs some people to do some really detailed planning. The application of Murphy's Law, where what can go wrong will go wrong, is an enduring truth. That's a constant. It's never a dull day because the plan never survives contact with our own friendly forces, never mind the enemy.
For example, NATO ARC might call upon the M3 rig in Germany, NBC Specialist in the Czech Republic, and American Armour. And although NATO does not train in the numbers of Exercise Lionheart, it does carry out road moves and logistics when member nations come together for exercises.
Last year, myself and my team deployed to Norway on Exercise Trident Juncture. That was NATO's biggest exercise for over 2 decades. NATO deployed 50,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen and marines to Norway, the equivalent of 7 brigades in under 30 days. From the UK, we sent our own 4th Infantry Brigade, and they travelled there by road, which is a real achievement. So yeah, the scale might not be the same, but the activity and the intent behind it will absolutely be there.
Besides, it might not be as necessary to attempt to replicate a movement of Lionheart's scale, as one of its main goals was to prove that it could be done. And in 1984, the British Army proved that it could, through expert planning, logistics and engineering. And those skills are still in the UK, even if the numbers are not.
This is Trooper Valentine, Royal Hussars, in a wood, somewhere in Germany. Heavily overdrawn on his English bank account. That's all from Lionheart Report.
Thanks for watching this episode of Intel. If you were involved in Exercise Lionheart, if you took part in some way, then let us know in the comments. And the next episode's going to be all about the inner Germany border, so stay tuned for more and be sure to subscribe. Guess I better drive home then. I wonder when the next train is.